All right, welcome. It's day 3. You've made it this far. You might as well stick it out. So I promise, I know a lot of you guys are getting impatient. We're going to get into the actual demand soon. We're going to get into the ABC analysis. We're going to get into the SKUs daily, weekly, monthly. I know we're all itching to calculate tack time 17 different ways. That said, today is the last day we're spending outside of the factory walls, understanding our customer. It's day 3. Day 3. We made it. So today we're talking about a consumer who is really the creator of the demand and how that demand gets through the channel and into our factory, because every step that demand takes changes our demand picture. And we want to know what steps it's going through so that we can, again, further understand all of the influences on our demand, again, as it hits our factory walls. Like I said in video 1, demand is like waves crashing against the side of your factory. And understanding those waves and understanding potential sources of those waves is really important. So stick with it and enjoy this video. If you have any comments, leave them below. We'll get a dialogue going. Thanks. All right, let's get into it. Final aspect of demand. Demand is all created by consumers. We know, makes sense, right? So everything we make, whether it's a part that's going into a car, it's something that you're going to buy in a food store, if who knows, if it's a widget off of a shelf, everything that we make ultimately has to end up with a consumer by and large. I'm guessing there's some special exceptions out there, but understanding how that consumer demand flows upstream through a channel and into your factory it's absolutely vital, right? So what I'm going to talk about today is what are channels, and people call them sales and marketing channels. I don't know much about sales and marketing. I'm not an expert in that field, but I use them to model how the demand gets processed and ultimately ends up as an order for us in our factory, right? So if you think about it, if everything starts with the consumer and they're purchasing something, oftentimes, especially if you're in a consumer goods kind of environment, they'll purchase that item from a retailer, right? So you go shopping in a store, whether it be for a food or whether it be for a gift for your kid's birthday, you're going into a store at a retail outlet to purchase a product, right? So throughout the day, throughout week, throughout the month, consumers are going into retail outlets, they're purchasing products, and that's creating that demand. Well, what happens in that retailer is they're consolidating that demand, right? They're aggregating it, accumulating that demand over a certain time period, right? So they might receive a shipment every month or every 2 months from a distributor with the products that they need to replenish, right? Which makes sense. So you have this accumulation of demand over time, and then a large signal being sent to a distributor, let's say. Upstream of a distributor, or a distributor plays virtually the same game, right? So a distributor might be somebody in, let's say, any particular industry, the audio-visual industry, it might be loads of consumer electronics, right? So you have a distributor for consumer electronics that have loads of different brands that they have and different products and product families. So as retailers throughout the days and weeks and months are ordering from them with these large accumulated orders from the consumers, the distributors then are accumulating orders themselves, right? So they might send out, 4 stereo systems here and 4 stereo systems to this retailer and 4 stereo systems to this retailer. And then once every 2 or 3 months, they might be getting a shipment in from Japan in order to replenish their inventory level. Or they might be getting a shipment in from you to replenish their inventory level. But what is happening to that demand over time? What's going on there, right? Tiny little, if you think about it as a graph, right? Tiny little waves of demand from consumers are being accumulated into larger waves of demand from retailers, which are being accumulated into larger waves of demand going into distributors, and ultimately even larger demand pictures coming into the factory and coming into whoever's replenishing that product. So you have what we call, or what I call, demand amplification. I don't know where I heard that term, but I learned it once. And it's really as a signal, or as demand flows up the channel towards the manufacturer, the signals always grow in amplitude because you're accumulating orders over a period of time. So a couple of models I have here on the screen to show you. You'll see that the typical model that we're talking about is, again, consumer at the bottom, retailer, distributor. Sometimes there's an agent or a broker in there, and then above that is the manufacturer. I use that really as to start out with, like a basic model, right? Because you need to ask and understand those questions about our customers. Remember, we already analyzed our customer demand. We know we have lots of orders in terms of volume of quantity of product going out in, to a certain group of customers, about 16 customers, right? Is 80% of our demand. And then we have lots and lots of customers that are ordering, it appears to be, a lot of little things, an additional 300 or some odd customers, right? So what are the classifications of these customers? Are we selling direct to consumer? Are we selling to retailers? Are we selling to distributors? Or, which is often the case, are we selling to other manufacturers even higher up in the food chain, so to speak, or in the demand chain, right? So if you're a manufacturer that's selling to other manufacturers, so let's say you're a tier 2 automotive supplier and you're supplying plastic components to a transmission builder, and that transmission builder is building the transmissions and sending them on to Ford, it's the same, I guess, amplification, the same demand amplification is having in that case as well, right? It's the same thing. As demand travels upstream, the amplitude of those signals is going to increase, right? As people consolidate the orders and over time, and then send the signal upstream for replenishment, everything just gets bigger. This is a huge source of waste and a huge source of overproduction. And we need to know about our own value stream, what role or what path our demand is taking, right? And we need to be able to split that out. So to that end, I would say you need to ask yourselves the question, do we have different customer classes? Are we selling direct to consumer? Are we selling to retailers, distributors, to other manufacturers? Is there an agent or a broker in between us and a distributor, right? Agent and brokers play the same game. They might have 4 distributors with whom they work, right? They own that relationship. Well, they're going to accumulate and aggregate all the demand from maybe 3 or 4 distributors. So we need to understand that path, and we need to be able to dissect the data as such, right? It's important to be able to classify each of your customers in a position within a channel, if appropriate, right? If all of your customers are they're all manufacturers, Craig. I'm dealing with I'm a tier 2 automotive supplier, and I'm supplying to, Borg Warner transmissions, and that's what I do. It's a little bit more straightforward. But in a lot of cases, you have situations where you're supplying different points in that channel. And you have to be able to slice and dice that demand data over those different pieces of the different positions in the channel to which you're supplying. All right, so let me talk about that variability again. So we understand the concept that is demand flows from the consumer upstream in the channel. Orders get accumulated, demand gets amplified. But if we think about the idea of a manufacturer, let's say your own company that you're working with right now, you think about going direct to consumer, immediately your first reaction is like, Whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want to play that game. Are you kidding me? Direct to consumer? That's not something I want to do. I'd have to process so many orders, right? Instead of having one order a week that I process, now I'm going to have to process 200 orders a day. It's a completely different ballgame, and I get it. That said, remember how demand amplifies as you go up? The variability of demand, the closer you are to the consumer, the variability of demand as a percentage of the average demand picture is significantly less the closer you are to a consumer. What does that mean? That means if normally let's say I'm in a business and I'm supplying to retailers and I'm not supplying to customers right now, all right? So, and these two steps you could put anywhere, right? So let's say you're supplying to manufacturers, right? And you wanted to supply, instead of the manufacturer, you wanted to go to tier 1, and maybe you go to the customer himself and supply your widget, right? So for any two steps in that channel, when you go closer to the consumer, yes, there's more orders to process, no doubt about it. There's certainly challenges with that. But the advantage is you now have, and I'm making up numbers here, instead of one retailer, you have 200 consumers. You have 200 different consumers pulling the same amount of product out of your factory versus one, right? And so normally you'd have a demand picture that would be steady, and then I ship, steady, and I ship, steady, and I ship, right? And all of that demand over that week or that month is accumulated, right? When you go down in the channel closer to the consumer, what happens is you have 200 people ordering, and your demand picture becomes, believe it or not, becomes much more predictable and stable day to day and hour to hour, right? Whereas when you have a handful of retailers that you're trying to deal with, we all know ordering habits of retailers, right? So if 3 retailers decide to order this week, and maybe next week no retailers order, and then the following week all 5 retailers order, and then the following week after that you only get 1 order, right? You feel the factory being jerked around by the planning department, right? Oh, this order, we got to ship this, we got to do this, oh, we got to make this, right? And it requires you to carry a certain amount of inventory just to kind of practically deal with that amount of variability. If you were dealing direct to consumer, believe it or not, you'd have more predictability in the amount of product that would leave your factory every day. So I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to open up a project and go direct to consumer. It's absolutely impractical for many, many business models. But I am suggesting to not be afraid of understanding what it would take to go down one step toward the consumer in your particular value stream and in your particular situation. Don't be afraid of it. For instance, if you're supplying distributors right now and retailers right now, right, you could make a business case, sales aside and contracts aside and ticking off distributors aside. But you could make a business case with math that says, hey, my variability is going to go down by this much if I cut out the distributor and go straight to the retailer, right? And therefore, I'd need to carry much less inventory, or my customer service levels would be much better. So I know it would take an investment on my part in order to get us to go to direct to consumer, but in doing so, or direct to retailer rather than to distributors, but in doing so, I would be able to save this much money in inventory reductions and in floor space and all the things that go along with elimination of variability, right? So that's what I'm talking about. The channel and how your products get to the consumer, and understanding that and classifying all of your customers. So those top 16 that we have, we need to understand, what are they? Are they other factories? Are they distributors? What are they, right? And in essence, we really need to go through all of the different customers that are purchasing. And when we set up a new customer, we want to classify that customer, and we want to track demand by customer class, right? I want to know how the retailers are behaving. I want to know how the distributors are behaving. If I have direct-to-consumer business through e-tailing or something on my website, or perhaps I'm just sending it to a 3PL. So if I am dealing with any level, or I should say, if I'm dealing with multiple levels in my channel, I want to be able to evaluate the variability of demand of each of those levels, right? This is the place too, you might want to split out things like international distributors versus domestic distributors, right? Sea freight plays a whole different, or I should say, introduces a whole nother level of variability that we'd have to deal with. So looking at international distributors versus domestic distributors, looking at retailers, looking at direct to consumers, looking at other manufacturers, and being able to classify all of our customers into those positions within our channel becomes really important for understanding our total picture and customer demand, right? So, yeah, that's it for today. I'm going to try. All right, we did it. 3 days. 3 days of dealing with who our customers are, where our customers are, who our customers are selling to, where they're located in the world, and how far away are they, and what part of the geographic region might they come from. We looked at demand in aggregate and how much variability we have coming against the factory, average sales per day, average number of orders processed a day. We even looked at book sales per day and got a feel for the overall variability. So I feel pretty good that we have a really good feeling about our customers, who they are, and what the total demand picture looks like. So the next chapter, the next set of videos, is going to be about coming a little bit closer inside the four walls of our factory. We're going to be diving into the actual demand. We're going to look at all the different SKUs. What are our customers buying, right? That's the big piece of the puzzle. We still have to, I guess, the big piece of the mess we have to untangle, right? What are we selling? What are we selling the most of? What are we selling the least of? What does our tail look like? How many different SKUs do we make? How many different SKUs are we shipping? So all of that's going to come in the next few videos. So stick around for that. In the meantime, if you really want more information about this stuff, visit our website, flowcreated.com. Also, if you have any questions about any of the stuff that we've been talking about here from this video or the subsequent the previous two videos, just give me an email, info@flowcreated.com, info@flowcreated.com. So the previous two videos will be linked below. If you like the content, subscribe, like. If you want to get a dialogue going or you have some questions, leave a comment below. Happy to interact with you that way. So thanks very much for sticking with us this far. And remember, don't be a 5S'er, create flow.